Good morning and welcome to IMEG Academy and Pancakes and Politics. If everyone would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before I introduce the Senate President, I first want to thank him on behalf of the Manatee Chamber for the gracious amount of time he spent with us in Tallahassee a couple weeks ago with the Legislative Committee, hosting us in the Senate President's conference room and also stopping by our joint reception with the Sarasota Chamber. I think it shows not only his respect for his constituents here in Manatee County, but also his support for the business priorities of the leaders here in the community at the Chamber. Also, while I have attention and with so many government officials in the room, and I hope he's taking attendance for the rest of the delegation not here, I just want to recognize him for his outstanding leadership on behalf of not only our local region, but the Tampa Bay area. A lot of that behind the scenes that most people do not get to see, but the rest of the delegation can certainly attest to. We're certainly going to miss his leadership after this last legislative session with him, and we want to thank him for his leadership and service to the state of Florida.
You gotta love the Florida House, right? So I was taking notes earlier about who was here on time, who wasn't. So first of all, thank you for having me. We can have a Bill Galvano town hall, if you like, here today, and that's fine. I have always enjoyed coming to the events that you do pre-session and after session and sharing with you some of what goes on, because there's a lot that you don't see that happens in Tallahassee. A lot that you experience that you don't realize you're experiencing from issues that were addressed while we were in session and in committee hearings. And it's important that we have that opportunity. But more important is the opportunity for us to interact with you. Because the reality is, in many ways, once you get up to Tallahassee, to the state capitol, it's a bit of a fantasy land. You're in an area or you're in an atmosphere where industry battles and certain special interest issues become very elevated, and you're told, here he comes. And anyway, so that's all I have to say about Tommy Gregory. But But it's important for us to go back, and I've said this my whole career, and look in the mirror of your constituency. Look in the eyes of the people that put you there in the first place. And that's one of the challenges in American politics, and it's not unique to Florida, is that the way our system works, the more you rise or the more responsibility you get in government at the state and at the federal level, the less opportunity you have to spend time with the people who actually put you there in the first place. And so it's a very important thing that you do here, to have us come and to share your thoughts and ask the questions that you do. Just briefly, as many of you know, we had an extremely productive session last year, one of the most productive sessions that I can ever remember, and probably one of the most productive sessions in history. And a lot of that had to do with the civility and the respect and the decorum that we operated under between the Florida House and the Florida Senate. Speaker Jose Oliva is a dear friend of mine, and we addressed the issues, even though we didn't agree on everything, but in a manner that is worthy of the people in this room and worthy of the people who reside in this great state. And the same held true with the governor on the plaza level. And by the way, he's doing a phenomenal job, Governor Ron DeSantis. He really, really is, and is very respectful of the legislative process. Probably more collaborative than I can remember. I hearken back to Governor Bush when I think that type of collaboration. And ironically, when we addressed some of the issues in education, Governor Bush actually came back to the legislature to sit on the floor and watch us pass these issues. But it's what is required of government. It's not always happening. When I look at Washington, D.C., it is not like we operate in the state of Florida at all. There's a lot of rancor. There's a lot of divisiveness. And, I told the Florida Senate that we have to be the example. We can't just wait for things to fix at the federal level or around the country, or around the world for that matter. That the Florida Senate would be the example of how to conduct business and how to highlight that there is still honor in public service. And we have done that, and we are going into our last committee week, pre-session next week, and then into session in January. And you can expect that same type of conduct and decorum and respect and civil discourse that we have had in the last session, and hopefully it will continue going forward. And what that means is we will be able to address the very important issues facing the state. And when we went in last session, we were already $1.8 billion behind the eight ball because of Hurricane Michael. And that's a reality. And in past times when we've had these major storm events, Washington was right there to help and make sure that our federal dollars that we send, like the other states, were available to help us. But that wasn't the case this time. And so that was just one other example where we had to step up at the state level and say, look, if you're not going to get this, we've got it. We'll take care of it. We'll find the dollars to make it happen. We did the same thing with Lake Okeechobee. How long can you wait? We'll step up and do it because our economy is strong. We have the reserves because we've made tough decisions for decades. Every session that I've been in the process, we've made those tough decisions and thought about the future to make sure that we are fiscally strong to do what is necessary when we have to do it. It's just unfortunately I didn't realize that we'd get to a point where we have to pretty much do everything for ourselves. But it is good to know that we have unemployment outpacing the rest of the nation, that we have a AAA bond rating from every rating agency, that we have the ability to do things because of our decisions and your hard work and what you create on a daily basis that many other states cannot do. Going into this session, we're going to build on some of the things that we did last session, and one of the issues that you've heard a lot about is K-12 education. Well, let me make clear that we prioritized in the Florida Senate K-12 investment. It had not been prioritized at the level that it was last session for years, frankly. And I see Watchdog over there nodding. The reality is that we have to make that investment, and that's what we did. And now it's good for me to see the governor coming back and now wanting to continue to make that investment. And we're going to have to work through how that investment comes into play, whether it's a categorical or not, but we need to continue to make that traditional investment, just like we did in our higher education. I chaired the education appropriations for 4 years in the Senate. We made tremendous investments in our university system, and we are making more and more investments in our state college system, which is a priority for me. But what's the net result? 2 years in a row, the #1 state for higher education in the nation by U.S. News and World Report. That's big to have that right here in the state of Florida. We have 2 top 20 universities, and we have preeminent universities, including USF and UCF, and we continue to grow and be a destination state for education, as well as the other purposes that people come here. Environmentally, we made a tremendous investment last year. I don't see any reason why we're going to peel back that investment this year. $665 million going to various projects, including projects to address the quality of our water. We've created and had the Red Tide Initiative that's run through Mote Marine Laboratory at $18 million. Continue to work on the quality of the water in Lake Okeechobee, and important to me was a $50 million investment in storage wells north of the lake, because that's what's capturing the runoff. Infrastructure has been a great priority of mine in the Florida Senate and of the legislature and of the governor. And we made tremendous investment in creating opportunities for multi-use corridors, which includes naturally transportation, but prioritized this year will be the broadband access, fixed broadband access for these small communities, for their first responders, for the school kids who need the internet, and then to make sure that we have water and sewer connectivity and funds available for those projects. And so stay tuned and watch as we move that ball forward. And then, of course, there's security at all levels, including mass violence. And I've asked our Infrastructure and Security Committee to really look at that issue. And we have a lot of policy ideas that have come forward, everything from intelligence work to increased gun safety to mental health issues. And we're going to look at that bigger picture. In addition to building on the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas legislation that we passed 2 years ago, then we had 2.0 last year, and we'll have additional changes to that legislation this year. We created a commission to look at these issues, to make sure that our children are safe when they go into a school, and we're making progress in that regard. Just the red flag laws that we have put into place have been a vital tool for law enforcement, and that's important stuff. I mean, I remember speaking to you, and I'm going to wrap up now that we're getting more folks here. But you guys, hey, feel free to ask questions later. But I spoke to you a couple years ago after that horrific incident in Parkland, Florida. And the reality was, I went down there. You see some things in life you never want to see and some things that you cannot unsee. But in doing the investigation and understanding the multitude of issues that were at play, and then coming back here and reflecting on my own community, literally outlined that bill at my kitchen table with all the components that were in it. And a lot of them were not popular, for lack of a better word, but we did it. But it also did something that I hadn't seen in a while. It was the first time in a long time that the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate and the incoming Speaker and incoming President all rolled out together one piece of legislation, and it showed that unity. And that brings us full circle to how I started. That unity is so very much important because all of us who toil in government, whether it's at our county commission level, the city level, staff, any type of bureaucratic function, we're all doing it for the public good. We all want results. The product that we produce is a better quality of life and more access to things that are important, and more freedom for the people who create prosperity in this nation. And so if we can remember that we're all producing the same product, it's going to be a lot easier to get there than to try to build yourself up by putting someone else in peril. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm leaving a little bit early today because I am going to have a meeting in Pensacola this afternoon, and so we'll do that. But it's, again, I appreciate very much that you're letting me come here.
Thank you, Mr. President. And again, I'm sure Representative Robinson and Representative Gregory's projects are in safe order going forward. It's made it before the end of the Senate President's remarks. Now I want to take a few moments to recognize several of the elected officials that are here in the audience today. When I call your name, if you please stand and be recognized. City of Bradenton Mayor Wayne Poston. City of Bradenton Councilman Gene Brown. I know I saw him. Hey, Gene. Manatee County Clerk of Circuit Court Angel Colonesso. Thanks, Angel. Judge Renee Inman. Judge Diane Moreland. Judge Gilbert Smith. I know I saw Judge Smith this morning. Did he already leave? Okay. Supervisor elections and former Senate President Pro Tem Mike Bennett, Senator. Manatee County Commissioner Vanessa Baugh. I saw her. Manatee County Commissioner Bellamy. I did not see him this morning. Manatee County Commissioner Benak. I know I saw her. Commissioner Benak. Manatee County Commissioner Steve Johnson. I know I saw him. Manatee County Commissioner Misty Servia. I know I saw her. Good morning. Manatee County Commissioner Priscilla Trace. I know I saw her. Manatee County Commissioner Whitmore. Good morning. Manatee County School Board Member Dave Miner. And I didn't see Gary Tibbetts from Congressman Buchanan's office. Oh, there's Gary. Thanks for coming. Thank you all for coming. I also want to go ahead and recognize the Chamber's Legislative Committee. So if you all would please stand, even if you didn't go to Tallahassee, please stand and be recognized for all your great work. All their work is sitting in front of you, the legislative priorities that you're at your table. So if you have any questions about those that you don't ask the legislators at the end of today's remarks, you can refer to those there. And then right now I want to recognize our sponsor for today's event, Spectrum by Charter Communications and Kaiser University. We appreciate their support, and I'd ask Albie Kamansky with Spectrum to come up to the podium, please.
All right, good morning, everybody. All right. Well, first things first, thank you, Casey, for hosting this, too. And I'm honored to stand here next to President Galvano. We've seen him over the past couple of years, obviously rising in leadership as the Senate president, but he came in with a mission on preaching civility and, like you said, that honorable discussion within the Senate chambers, and he set out on that mission, and I think it's still holding true to this day, and it's something that's missing in Florida politics recently. So again, I just want to commend you for your leadership and everything else that you've been doing, not only for the community, but for the state as a whole. So. And again, I can't believe we're all here right after a good Thanksgiving and actually rolling out of it. Was definitely taking my time and wearing the elastic sweatpants after Thanksgiving holiday. But now we're getting into the holiday season. I think the Christmas trees and the holidays trees are fresh from Florida, of course, are going to be delivered up to the Capitol, I think, today, too. So we're getting into that holiday season. So it's great to see everybody here and still dedicated here to the cause. Again, I'd be remiss if I didn't say a couple of words on behalf of Spectrum here. As many of you all know, Spectrum was our brand here, as Bright House Cable, Time Warner Cable, and Charter Communications all merged together 3 years ago to form Charter Communications, all operating under the Spectrum brand. Again, we have now evolved into a big Fortune 100 company with 100,000 employees across the 41 states across the nation. However, I say all that to say we still have a hyper-local focus here in the community. We've got a couple of our representatives here. Steve, if you want to raise your hand here too. So again, we're very local here in the community. Just want to thank you all again for your time. Casey, thank you again. I know we put together a big legislative meeting up in Tallahassee here, so you did a great job of organizing all that. Jackie, thank you again too, and look forward to a good session up here next coming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Albie. Can you all hear in the back? No? It's very hard. Okay. I can't get closer to this mic without, swallowing it, so I will do my best. Again, want to thank Albie and, again, the Legislative Committee, who all traveled, as Albie mentioned, to Tallahassee last month. The Chamber Commandos hit their ground running in the Capitol, and we had very productive meetings with the legislative delegation that is here today. Again, on your table is the legislative priorities that we advocated for on behalf of the Chamber, and those are the issues that we're going to be discussing today. Now at this time, I'm going to recognize members of our local delegation to come up and get as close to the mic as possible and give a few remarks on what your legislative priorities are this year, bills you're sponsoring or issues that you're looking at supporting going into this session before we get into questions. So Representative Gregory.
Thank you, Casey. Well, first, I feel like I'm 15 minutes behind President Galvano this morning. In Tallahassee, it feels like we're 15 years behind him. I'll tell you, just listening to him this morning, just think about the breadth of the topics that he covered in that short period of time, and you can tell the depth of his knowledge on everything from education to the environment to the budget and everything that Tallahassee legislators and he individually as a president of the Senate has to manage. It's really impressive, and it really speaks volumes to his sheer dedication for the number of years that he has served Manatee County Sarasota County, Hillsborough County, and the entire state of Florida. It really is a pleasure to serve on the delegation and have President Galvano here leading the way. We do have a good team. Maybe we don't like to show up exactly early, but we do have a good, strong team, and we work well together under his leadership. Before I talk about my priorities this year, I'll just say one thing, one observation about Tallahassee. If I had to give an analogy of what it's like serving after just 1 year, I would tell you it's kind of like marriage, right? It's a lot more work than you think it's going to be, but at times it's a lot more rewarding than you thought it would be. And we really do vote together in a bipartisan way. The vast majority, well over 80% of our bills and new laws are effectively unanimous. There might be 1 or 2 votes against it, but more than 80% are unanimous. It's only a few issues that divide us in Tallahassee, and I think we set a good example for the country in the way that we lead our state. This year, the things that I would like to work on, and I'll ask your help, 2 big priorities of mine. Number 1, road construction. We got to build more roads. And of course, that captures for Manatee County bridges. So we know those are the 2 things that we need to do in Tallahassee. I know that that's where my constituents want me to focus my time and energy. And my background in roads is 0. So that means I have a lot to learn. So I'm going to follow President Galvano's example and just dig in and ask the experts for help, starting with our county commissioners. I won't name them each, but I will tell you each of them are all-stars, and each of them are helping us do our jobs better. They give us a lot of their time and energy and advice on the things that we need to do to help Manatee County, and things that we need to do to help the members of the Chamber of Commerce and all of our constituents. So I thank them for their advice and the education and the training that they're giving me on road construction and road planning and working with FDOT and so on. The second thing that I'm going to focus on is continuing Governor DeSantis's good work, which of course builds on Governor Scott's good work, which is cutting regulations. We still have a tendency in government to, it's almost like we're justifying our existence. We want to pass new laws and pass new regulations, and agencies really are the shadow government in Florida just as they are across the country. Agencies, once they are stood up, have a tendency to create new rules, and those rules effectively serve as laws. And so my request of you is, if you are having or facing a regulation or dealing with a regulation, again, not part of the Florida statute, but if you have that problem too, if it's a law-based issue, let me know. Shoot me an email and say, this is a regulation that we would like to see cut, and I'll pursue it through the Joint Administrative Rules Committee, or if necessary by changing the law. But I think we want to continue Governor DeSantis's good work on a deregathon, and so you'll see me sponsoring some legislation in that area. Again, it is a pleasure to represent you and serve you in Tallahassee. If you have any questions or suggestions, reach out anytime. Casey, you want me to turn over to?
I'll make a remark or 2 if you don't mind.
All right, thank you.
Great job.
Thank you, Representative Gregory. And I want to point out a couple items. First, he's a former member of the Manatee Chamber Legislative Committee, and I want to brag on him a little bit. When our Chamber commandos went to Tallahassee a couple of weeks ago, he was very forward with us on his passion, as I might say, for transportation issues. And it just so happened, after we were meeting with him, we had a meeting with the Secretary of Transportation, and we said, hey, Representative Gregory, we're getting ready to go over and meet with the Secretary of Transportation. If there's anything you would like us to pass along. He said, absolutely. Tell him where my office is and tell him to come over, and I'm willing to do anything I can on behalf of Manatee County. So I want to praise him for that. And with that, I want to recognize Representative Margaret Good, who just joined us from Sarasota County. We view the issues that are here in our region as bi-county regional issues. So we always invite our members to represent both Sarasota and the Manatee Legislative Delegation. And again, want to welcome her to the Pancakes and Politics event and let her come up and speak for a few minutes on some of the priorities that she has for this legislative session, and appreciate your indulgence. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Thank y'all for being here. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to the Chamber. It's great to see you all today. I don't know if I can make these. Can you? Okay. All right. There we go. Okay. Hi. So if any of you have heard me speak before, you know that my number one priority is water quality. I care a lot about things that a lot of people don't care a lot about, like stormwater and wastewater. Since the red tide outbreak in 2018, I have been working really hard to update our stormwater rules. You may know that before Governor Scott was elected, the entire state was on board moving towards updating our stormwater rules. And that's important because the stormwater that goes into our gutters ends up in our canals and ultimately in our Gulf. And so the more that we do to create barriers to get that water in so that the toxins and the nutrients dissipate before they get into the Gulf, the better it is for our water quality. So that project was started before Governor Scott got elected. Once he got elected, he also believed in deregulation, and so he cut the DEP and got rid of updating the stormwater rules. And I believe that it's time that we bring those rules up to speed. And so I've been working really hard on updating the stormwater rules. I think it's something that no matter how you feel about regulation, it's something that we can all get behind because we all care about water quality. And so I've been working with the stormwater systems, with the developers, with my legislative delegation colleagues to get that project moving. And it's a bill that I filed this session. Senator Gruters has it on the Senate side, and so we'll be working. There's also some possibility that Governor DeSantis may just direct the Department of Environmental Protection to update the rules themselves. It could be done by agency action without having to necessarily do it through the legislature. So that's something that I'm working really hard on this year, and that I hopefully see going forward. Wastewater is another big issue. I know in Manatee County, just like in Sarasota County, we have seen a lot of wastewater spills, a lot of discharges because we've had a lot of rainwater, and not enough infrastructure to hold that wastewater in when there's a lot of rain. And so looking at ways to update our infrastructure, making sure that the local governments are getting the resources they need to update the infrastructure, and then providing some guidance from the state of what that should look like is another one of the things that I care a lot about, and I'm working on this legislative session. I care about public education, so I want to make sure that our schools are fully funded. I spent some time in some Manatee County public schools recently, and I think it's clear from everyone, if you've been paying attention to what's happened in the last year in Manatee County, after the millage was passed, some really good things are happening in Manatee County public schools. I went to Daughtry Elementary, where they have the dual language program, and those kids are learning like crazy. And then I went to see the STEM program at Palmview Elementary, which is also, world class. And if we put the money that we need to put into our public school system, we're going to get great results. You can see it happening right here in Manatee County. And so I am an advocate for public education. I'm an advocate for fully funding our public education system, and want to make sure that that is a priority, not just for me, but for our entire legislative delegation. Teacher pay is something that has gotten a lot of play in the media recently. I think everyone recognizes that Florida teachers are at the lowest pay when you look at our 50 states. We need to change that. We need to actually pay our teachers, not pay our teachers with bonuses, and so that's something that I also advocate for. when you think about what happened with red tide, I think we all realize that we need to diversify our economy, and it's something that I know Manatee County has been working on and done a really good job with in recent years. I mean, you think about Mercedes Medical, you think about what's happening at the port, but we need to continue that across the region and not just be based on, we can't just have a service-based economy. One of the things that I'm doing this legislative session is looking for a funding stream to fund workforce training for solar and renewable energy jobs. I think that there's a lot of good things on the horizon with respect to renewable energy, and we need to educate our workforce so that we have the workers to do those jobs as they become available. With respect to healthcare, there's no question 2.5 million Floridians don't have access to health care. We need to do something about it. I am a proponent of expanding Medicaid. It actually would cut Florida's bottom line. It's money that we're already paying into our federal taxes, and it would give 800,000 more people access to health care. To the extent that that is not going to happen in this legislature, I look for other ways to relieve some of the stress of the cost of health care. I'm looking at ways to increase the affordability of prescription drug prices, and to find ways to lower healthcare costs. And I have a sort of really good feel-good project I'm working with a young woman named Savannah who's 11 years old. You may have seen her in the newspaper. She is trying to require infant cardiac screening in every hospital for every birth in Florida. It saved her little brother's life, and now she is working to make sure it saves a lot of other people's lives. And so we are working together on that, so that'll be a really fun project. But I look forward to hearing your questions, and thank you so much for having me here.
I want to thank Representative Good for coming up. As a person who holds dual citizenship in Sarasota and Manatee counties, from being born and raised in Sarasota and living and working in Manatee, I appreciate how hard it is to come north of the border sometimes. So I want to appreciate you coming and giving some great remarks. I also want to praise Representative Good for her interaction with us during the legislative meetings and really engaging conversation about water quality issues. One of the top priorities, obviously, as you'll see on the table, is water quality for us, and this generated from some serious discussions we had at the Manatee Chamber of Commerce retreat, not this past year, but the previous year, when we know, just looking out this beautiful window here at the view here, we were just inundated with red tide and the issues that were going on. And then we went down to Bonita Springs and we're inundated with blue-green algae coming out of the Caloosahatchee. So we know that water quality are not issues that start or stop on county lines, and it's an important issue for the state of Florida. So thank you for talking to us about that. And with that, I want to recognize a former chair of this committee, Representative Will Robinson, for his remarks.
Thank you and good morning. I want to start off by saying how historic this morning is. You may never, as a Manatee Chamber, see this again. Once we got the Senate President out of the room, you now have 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats. I don't believe that's happened in the history of the... So this is your chance. This is your chance to have a very spirited debate between very friendly colleagues. And we actually, all of us, represent Sarasota County at some piece as well. So we see each other a lot. But it is my pleasure to be here today, and it's my second session. So last time I was here in front of you all, I was going in as a first-year freshman. Am I still a freshman, Congressman? Representative? Okay. So it's my second session. So I'm very excited about what's going to happen this upcoming session. And if I were to characterize potentially what this session may look like, I'd like to break it down to 2 words. And that first word is budget. A lot of the issues we're probably going to talk about today involve the budget, whether it's affordable housing or teacher pay or water quality or education, almost all of those matters are in our budget. Actually, all of them are in our budget. And the governor just released his proposal, and we're going through it. The House is going through it, and obviously the Senate President and his staff are going through it. It's actually the only constitutional requirement we have in the state of Florida right now. Now, next year we'll have another one. It's just the fun case of redistricting, but we don't have that yet. It's the budget. The budget is the most important thing we pass in the state of Florida. So all the priorities that we set in our state are because of the budget. And a lot of the debate, like I said earlier, will be because of issues we have regarding the budget. The budget is exceptionally important. And Representative Good mentioned a lot of the important priorities. Certainly water quality. This governor has made an outstanding commitment to funding water quality projects. And certainly in his next budget, he's done the same. And I don't really like to necessarily talk about last session very much because I want to talk about what we're doing moving forward. But last session, some really good work was done in the budget, including in water quality. Certainly if it was Will's budget, I would have had a little bit more in some areas. But I think overall, no budget is perfect, but that budget was pretty good. But this budget coming up is certainly especially important for our residents and citizens and all of us in this room. And so the budget is the primary, most important thing we do in Tallahassee. And then what's going to be so interesting about our perspective here is my second word made different than Representative Good's word. My second word is restraint. It's hard sometimes to tell folks no. It's hard sometimes to not file a bill. I almost lost my legislative aide a few weeks ago when I asked for her to count the pages in the statute books. As a lawyer, I was so excited we got our 2019 statute book. So there's 6 volumes. So I was just curious how many pages of statutes we added over the course of 1 year. And you didn't have to count every page, by the way. You can, one volume is 500 pages, and the second volume is 490 pages. So you just add 6 volumes. But we added around 168 pages of statute. And I'm sure many of those pages are important. But for me, and certainly the speaker gave us the message early on, and I'm assuming that's his message as well, restraint is also important. We have a great deal of needs, and we can't necessarily accomplish everything in one session. And I caught the tail end of President Galvano's remarks. Certainly when we started that session in 2016, Parkland hadn't happened yet. It actually happened on February 14th, Valentine's Day. So we really don't know necessarily what's ahead of us. So it's important that we accomplish the goals for Florida, but that we also show a bit of restraint. And I would note, it will be a bit interesting this session. It's obviously an election year in 2020, but at least as far as I know, neither of the presiding officers or the governor at this point are running for re-election. So we probably won't have the gamesmanship that sometimes you have, and certainly we didn't have it between the two bodies. And that's really, really comforting as someone in the Florida House. We don't have to worry about the disputes between the speaker and the president. They're ironing those out themselves. And I don't even, frankly, know what they were. And that is one of the reasons why I think you didn't see a lot of the bickering between the two chambers, was because of the respect that the speaker and the Senate president and the governor have for each other. And I assume that will only carry forward through this next session. But I'll leave you with one thought. And I always tremble, and I don't know how Representative Good does it, but I always tremble when I delve into federal topics, but I'll do that gingerly here. So we have a 60-day session coming up, and we're going to be in session January 14th, so let's say about a month. So in 100 days, think about what we're going to accomplish in Florida in 100 days. Hopefully we'll be done with our session. We'll present you with a balanced budget. I think we're going to pass some good policy bills. I wonder what Washington, D.C. is going to accomplish in 100 days. I'd be willing to bet the state of Florida accomplishes a lot more in 100 days. Thank you all. God bless.
Thank you, Representative Robinson, and you reminded me to thank the unsung heroes of this process, the legislative aides. Thank you all for what you do. Now I want to recognize Representative Newton. He was a great host to us for the chamber a couple weeks ago, and we had some very spirited discussions about K through 12 education and corrections and workforce issues within his district that covers all 4 counties of the South Bay Area, I guess when you say Pinellas, Hillsborough, Manatee, and Sarasota. So Representative Newton, thank you.
Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, my strength, O Lord, my Redeemer. Good morning. Good morning. It's 2 words. Good morning. I apologize for my tardiness. I saw my Senate President leaving down front when I got in, and had I known that we were going to have so much beautiful holiday traffic, I would have, instead of voting for those 3 toll roads, I'd have voted for some more bridges. But I had to get that in. He's already gone, so nothing he can do about it. But I want to thank Senate President Galvano for his service and all he has done. I mean, it's not easy. If you make it look easy, then you're professional. That's what I was told. Also, I want to remind my freshman colleagues that hold on and cherish that freshmanship, because it got me out of a lot. Because you can do a lot of crazy stuff and say, I'm a freshman. I didn't know. Hey, I didn't know. You didn't like it. Hey, I didn't know. You didn't come tell me. I didn't know. But next section, you won't be able to do that. But also, we have another historic moment to Representative Robinson, is that you have the first time, I think, a tenured Democrat that's on the table, a senior Democrat. So that's another first. But I want to, first and foremost, thank you guys for traveling to Tallahassee. That's very, 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 very important. You know, it's easy to come and do panels like this and tell us what your priorities are, but it's more important to come and be able to put a face to the issues and a voice to the concerns. That's way more important. You know, we have, like you just heard mentioned, 60 days in a session. We head back up in next week for our final committee week, but we also are advocating over a $91.4 billion budget. So we got a lot of people coming to see us with a lot of different priorities, and a lot of them aren't yours. So by you taking the time out and thinking it not robbery to travel to South Georgia, where it's cold as hell, I'm in Tallahassee, I'm sorry, weather that and come up and work the halls and speak with us, it speaks volumes, and it's really appreciated. And it's also great to see a face back from home. As you know, most of my priorities has been rather around early childhood and mostly juvenile justice. You know, I shared with the individuals that traveled up to Tallahassee that last year in this district, which encompasses Hillsborough, Manatee, Sarasota, and Pinellas, we arrested 10,846 juveniles. Now, I want that to sink in. I'm talking about the babies. I'm not talking about the 96,000 adults we have incarcerated. I'm talking about the 10,846 juveniles in 4 of the 67 counties. And of that, 53 of them were 8-year-olds. And 22 of those 8-year-olds were arrested right here where we sit in Manatee County. Now, I don't know what you do in the morning when you get your baby a backpack and their lunch that's going to have them in handcuffs by noon. But, you know, I'm definitely going to find out. It was a bad situation for me when we cycled back. You know, I'm one of the 8 Democrats that voted up on the education bill and got a lot of riff about that. But in those numbers I just gave you, 60 to 70% are African American. They're black boys and girls who look just like me. Also, a large majority of those come from our schools. They'll play games and tell us that of the 4,800 juveniles that were arrested in Hillsborough County, they have you to believe that 600 of them were arrested in school, while 4,200 was roaming around the neighborhood. Now, I don't know where you live, but I haven't seen 4,200 kids running around nowhere. You know, only time I see a lot of kids are in school. And you have the Department of Education and you have the Department of Juvenile Justice, which are two polar opposites. One is about graduating kids, and one is strictly supervised to lock them up and maintain the juveniles. Now we're talking about the babies, 8 to 17. In that budget also is $88.6 million that's set aside for juvenile jail beds. And it's worse than that, it's 100% privatized. So by definition alone, it's cash for kids. Also in the statute, it requires that when a kid is submitted to the Department of Juvenile Justice program, the funds are transferred from the general fund out of the Pinellas County School, out of the last school district which the kid attended into the Department of Juvenile Justice. So if that's not money leaving schools to go to private juvenile facilities, I don't know what is. And people have you believe that it's not good to take money away from schools, for private schools, for the parents to have a choice. But they'll also have you believe that it's okay for you to go visit your baby behind 6-inch thick glass in a private juvenile facility. And that one I can't wrap my arms around. And when most of them look like me, it's hard, because if not me, who? If not now, when? They need a voice, they need an advocate, they need a champion. Also, when I say we, one of my colleagues, Representative Hart, is proposing a bill that would reduce the game time from 85% to 65%, thus freeing up millions and millions in revenue. You heard about being having constraints and being tight. Well, when you lock up 96,000 people, that costs a lot of money, because you got to have you got to feed them, you got to provide for jail guards, which we are losing because they don't make the pay is not good, the conditions are horrible. You know what I mean? So and forget about the medical, because you have more and more revenue going toward that. So it's a lot of things we need to do differently, but we have to have a candid conversation. And I'm reminded that in my first session in 2016, and Representative Robinson touched on it, it was chaotic. You had the Senate president grappling with my second speaker that I'm on, Speaker Corcoran, and then you had Speaker Corcoran going after the governor. And then I had a reporter come up to me and they said, well, you're a Democrat. You got the Senate president in flux with the speaker, and the speaker going after the governor. What do you think of this? I just looked into the camera and said, isn't it great? You know, we've been taught and trained that as we sit on the back rows, when you witness Republican on Republican crime, you just order some more, you push the button, you order some more popcorn and some more Coke, and you sit there and just watch them go at it, because it's a beautiful thing. But But in the end, we all are there for one thing, and that's to work together for the 4 counties that I represent and the areas that we all represent, because we're all part of the same state, which is 67 counties, 412 cities, 22 million people. All these issues that you have on there are important and germane to us. I service 4 school boards: Hillsborough, Manatee, Sarasota, and Pinellas. You know, so when I pick up a paper yesterday and read that we have a young man that was put into a program that was for ostensibly mentally handicapped kids so that the school can get a good grade. And later on, he's put back where he's supposed to be, and he's severely behind where the other kids are. And a judge has ruled that this was wrong, and the school district should pay for his private education to get him caught up. And you still see semantics going back and forth, and the school board doubles down and say we're entitled to give him fair and free public education. And they were. And they were the ones also in charge of sticking him in a program where he shouldn't have been in the first place, because he didn't deserve to be there and he wasn't severely handicapped. What you might not know, for a regular kid going to school, he gets around $10,000, $9,000 to $10,000. But a kid with emotional problems and mentally handicapped that need more assistance, that's about $30,000 to $40,000. So they play games with these numbers, but they're playing games with our future. The easiest is the workforce. You talk about workforce readiness. If we're locking up 10,841 juveniles, do the math. I mean, most of the people sitting in here probably don't hire people with backgrounds. That's a background. A misdemeanor is a background. You know, I fight to bring back funds for work training, workforce readiness, and training for juveniles, but it's government money, so that government rules. And if you have background, you need not apply. There's your workforce. But we have a problem. We have a Department of Corrections, which is the institution, and then we have the schools and we have the youth. We got to keep the industry going. So when a juvenile When we can put a juvenile in with the adults at 14, that's what happens. We send the bad, terrible people to prison or jail, and people don't last always, so they die. And when they die or they get terminally ill, we send them home to have compassion so they can spend the last few weeks or whatever of life with their family. And I call BS because we don't want to pay the medical bills, and we damn sure don't want to bury them. But when that individual transpires, that's an empty bed. They get paid for butts and beds. We're able to adjudicate one of those 10,846 babies and stick them in that bed and keep the game going. That's what's really happening. And that's your workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Newton. Now we're going to enter into our question and answer period. If you have any questions, please line up over here. Wait for me to recognize you, and I'll repeat in your organization you're from, and I'll repeat your question so everyone can hopefully hear in the back. If we speak close enough into this microphone, I apologize. In the meantime, I'm going to ask a couple questions on behalf of the Legislative Committee off of these priorities, and start with a question that former Senate Pro Tem and Supervisor-elect Mike Bennett asked at the delegation meeting a couple months ago, and that is about the school readiness formula. That, as you see on our priority list, workforce is a major issue, and these are not ranked on priority order. But one thing we always talk about at the Chamber is the quality and availability of talent in our community, and starting that pipeline as early as possible is very important. So if you would please start by talking about that and your position, and I'll start off maybe Representative Good. You want to respond, or you want to defer? Representative Robinson, thank you.
It's a problem. And by the way, before I got elected, I think I was sick one time in 10 years. I've been elected for 1 year. I think I've been sick 10 times. So sorry for my voice. Just crazy all that happens this year. A lot of handshaking. The formula that Casey was talking about it's just wrong. And it amazes me that whatever formula we're talking about, whether it's the child care issue or workforce development for our technical kids, Manatee and Sarasota seem to always be on the wrong end of the formula. And several of these formulas, the folks don't even know how the formula was drafted or why it was drafted. It's exceptionally frustrating. I remember heading up, I think I was chair of the legislative delegation back in 2009 or 10, and we made some movement on this formula. And it's something that continually is a problem, at least on this issue. So it's something certainly we've notified the Speaker about. And with regard to the child formula, that's a bill that's been filed in the Florida House. So hopefully we'll get some movement on that. Because really what it does is it shortchanges our area. And in other areas, most likely the southeastern part of the state, get the benefit of an outdated and illogical formula. So I think this is something that's fairly bipartisan up here. It's something that we're fighting for because it's something that's wrong, that's not funded or not calculated properly for our area.
Well, early childhood is definitely the key. You know, I champion every year and bring back funds for HIPPY, which is home instructions for parents of preschool youth. I think that's where it starts at. When little Billy and little Susie are running around, falling down, bumping their heads at home, there's nobody there but you. And what HIPPY does, it comes into the home for 30 weeks. And all of that, it brings book shape, phonics, and colors. And all they ask of you is to turn the idiot box off for a couple hours and read to your kid. Because if you don't, somebody will, and they'll go something like this. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. So when my first session, I was on K-12 appropriations. These formulas are all antiquated and they're all messed up, not just in K-12. Also, I serve now in the part on children, family, and seniors. They have the same problem with funding because of these antiquated formulas. The good news is that they are trying to address those and make sure they're adequate as it pertains. It just said that's the way they did things a long time ago, and for a number of years, that's the way they left it. And a lot of people, when you talk about institutional employees, really don't want to move off that needle because they're used to doing what they always done. but everything's evolving, so that needs to evolve and change too. So I support and will be working toward trying to get proper funding and adequate funding throughout this whole state. Thank you.
Thank you, representatives. Okay, if you would go ahead and please state your name and the business or organization you represent and state your question.
My name is Joni Howard, and I own Joni's Cleaning Service. Representative Newton, I'm so supportive of what you do. I'm sorry I've never met you. Nice to meet you. In my business, it's very, very, very hard to hire people that need a second chance. And I have actually worked with the food pantry of Manatee County and the Blessings Bags Project to help people that are currently in shelters to rebuild their life. My problem is I own a cleaning business. I'm in residences and commercial properties. I run a criminal background check, and they come back with a laundry list of theft. So how can I possibly help the community rebuild themselves if they've been incarcerated? I mean, how can I hire people like that?
So I think the question is for those in the back of the room that couldn't hear is, again, a question to Representative Newton about his comments earlier about working through background checks for business owners. Is that fair, Representative?
And thank you for your question. That is definitely going to be a challenge. That's why you hear me advocating and ramping so hard about the babies. I mean, think about it. The people that you're trying to help, that you're trying to get jobs and work with, that didn't happen overnight. That started somewhere. And I guarantee you, if you go back, you see a laundry list of charges. It started when they were juveniles. And instead of everybody trying to get them an opportunity, we immediately put records on them. And
I've given them a couple.
Excuse me, people in the back can't hear you. So.
They couldn't hear you, so you got to step up to the mic.
So I'm able to give opportunities, but I've had some theft problems in my own company. So again, another objection. I'm not Jesus, I can't save the world, thank God. My dad says that to me all the time, but I want to help people. So how can I help the community with a background?
Yes, ma'am. What I would tell you, the challenge is that with the people that are currently in place, you have to probably put them in places where they're not going to be involved with the public. I'm pretty sure you say you have a cleaning service. You have trucks that's got to get from A to B. So maybe a mechanic that can work on those trucks where you're at, or maybe someone that's doing detailing and cleaning them where they're at. Just other ways other than having someone you know that has a criminal background with taking stuff, going into someone's home, damaging your business. I mean, like I said, I'm trying to cut that faucet off. I don't want to put more kids into that. 10,846, that's not going to end good. Trust me, it's not. And they're doing it as young as 8 years old. So all I'm saying is you have to find a creative way to try to maybe not have them work in that capacity. We had a lot of people after 9/11 when I was on St. Pete City Council who had to let go because they were working in these rec centers and they could not get past the level 2 background check, the Justice for Lunsford Act, if you remember that one. So we have to err on the side of safety. But at the same time, you have individuals coming back. If you don't give them an opportunity, and it's not trying to make you be God. I'm just talking about collectively, we will shelter the responsibility of sending them back to jail and paying more money in taxes and everything else to try to keep them there. But I appreciate you trying. I'm just trying to get a population going that you can hire. You talk about workforce development. We also have over 1.5 million returning citizens that's coming back, and they're coming back daily, trying to find ways. I think I spoke with a gentleman, he was with Career Source, he was with this group in Tallahassee, and he said he had a list of people that hire individuals with background challenges, and I asked him to get that to me, because I get people calling my office every day, trying to find an opportunity to work and provide for their families so they don't go back. So I thank you for what you're doing, and yes, it's a challenge.
We have a couple other reps that wanted to answer your question, but we'll wait on the line for that.
Actually, I just wanted to make a point. And one of the bills that I somewhat struggled with last session, which I ended up voting for, was raising the felony theft threshold. It used to be around, I believe, $350. $300. And we raised $700? $750. It hadn't been raised in over 20 years. And frankly, my dad, who owns several retail stores, was against raising it. But for me, It was something we hadn't raised in a long time, and folks were stealing minor stuff and having an albatross around their neck with a felony for what I would deem to be petty theft. So we made some progress. I know it doesn't directly address your issue, but I think we can do more, and I think this is somewhat bipartisan as well with regard to criminal justice reform, because we get these folks that commit, in my view, somewhat minor crimes, and they're in jail for a whole bunch of time. And it doesn't make any sense to me, whether it's a fairness aspect or a cost aspect. Like I mentioned in my opening remarks, we only have so much money, and we only have so much we can do in the state of Florida. And to me, it makes a lot more sense from an efficiency standpoint to get these folks that are good people that made a mistake, a minor mistake, get them out so we're not paying for them in jail, and get them working, productive people of society. So I think we're going to continue to work on that issue, and I think it's something that hopefully we'll see some more progress on.
Well, I really appreciate Representative Newton bringing this issue to the attention of everyone here today and talking about it, and I appreciate your question as well. I'm going to follow Representative Good's example and talk about common ground. You know, right after I spoke about the deregathon and let's cut some more regulations, she could have stood up and scored political points and said, something along the lines of, how'd that work out for you on water quality? But she didn't. You'll note that she didn't say that. I mean, she pointed out that there are things that we can, of course, do with DEP and stormwater regulations and some things that we need to look at and consider from a policy point of view. And I think by way of in the same good spirit, there is a movement in Tallahassee. We have been talking about it. I mean, I've only been there for a year, but I will just say even in that year, at least in the Republican leadership, we have been talking about how can we give people second chances? What can we do for business owners that want to give people a second chance to ease that burden for them? Because look, many of you in this room are business owners. So you know that you can put yourself at legal risk. I mean, you're not going to hire somebody with a history of thefts and then put them in somebody's home because they might steal something, and then you know that they could hire an attorney and come after you and say, it was a lack of due diligence on your part. So that may be the most difficult kind of example, but there are lots of other examples in the business community where they would hire people with misdemeanors on their record, with felonies on their record, but they need some protection statutorily. So I will just say legislatively, we are looking at it in Tallahassee and trying to find a way to help businesses, shield them from some liability, to encourage them to give people a second chance. But you can see the policy balance that we have to do there. Balancing protection for all constituents while making sure that everybody that is possible can get a second chance. And look, let's be honest with ourselves. We've all had a time in our life we needed a second chance. I will tell you, I had 14 years as a prosecutor, and you would think, well, why would this guy be talking about second chances? And I will just tell you, it was the majority of the time the people that would commit crimes had mitigating circumstances in their lives. There is always a mitigation. There is always a need for the sword and the shield. There's always a need for mercy in the criminal justice system and a need for those second chances. So I look forward to working with you on that, Representative Newton. Let's see if we can find a solution that balances those policy interests.
I'm so pleased that we all have something to say about the subject. And I think to the extent that there is, what we're talking about here really is a bunch of systemic problems. I don't think that there's anyone that, when asked in kindergarten what they want to be when they grow up, they say, I want to be a thief. I want to become a felon. And I think that when you think about the people, when you think about the issues that we're facing in our communities with addiction, with affordable housing, with the issues that put pressure on the system so that people end up in places that they never expected to be. That's the work that we need to be doing. And so I think that we need to look at things like the Sadowski Trust Fund, make sure that we're not sweeping it, that we have money to look at affordable housing, that we are fully funding mental health and doing things to help those that have addiction and treat it as the disease that it is, and don't just incarcerate people for having an addiction. And when we start doing those kinds of things, then maybe we solve, along with a lot of the things that my colleagues have said, then maybe we start solving some of these problems so that we have a really strong workforce, which I think is what we all are looking for. And to that end, I think the other thing that really makes a difference is, re-enfranchisement once you, after you've served your time. And I think what we did with Amendment 4 to allow felons the ability to vote after they had served their sentence was a great thing for the state of Florida, that constitutional amendment that was passed. I am hopeful that the legislature will go back this session and rethink the implementing legislation to get rid of those challenges and those hurdles that the legislature put on allowing felons the right to vote.
Great job, Representative Good. Thank you. One of the issues that we also brought up in Tallahassee, and Representative Good just alluded to it, is the Sadowski Housing Trust Fund. We know, living in this community, that affordable housing is a major issue, and one of the top issues that we talked about when we were in Tallahassee. So I asked some of the representatives if they want to touch on that issue.
Well, I know I can speak because we're going to have unanimous support. I know I speak on behalf of the entire delegation here when I say we are opposed to sweeping the Sadowski trust funds. But it also goes back to the great point that Representative Robinson made, which is Florida does have a constitutional requirement to balance their budget. We really do have, from the people in this room and around the state, an infinite number of good ideas and good programs that we can fund, and a very finite amount of money. Now, it's a big number, right? We're over $91 billion last year in our budget, and we still spent hundreds of millions of dollars in housing. Most of it, of course, naturally got diverted to the Panhandle to deal with the consequences of the hurricane. But we do need to focus on that, and I think we all know that the more workforce, attainable, affordable housing, whatever word you want to use to describe it, the more stability we can provide in the home, the more that we probably can avoid those systemic problems that Representative Good is talking about. So I think we have unanimous support in this delegation to avoid sweeping Sadowski trust funds and diverting them to other good uses.
Affordable housing is a problem. There is no doubt about that. It takes me back to where we were 05, 06, and the issues we faced within our community at that point. And Sadowski, if you think about it, and maybe we need to have more of a statewide conversation about affordable housing and the components of it, because Sadowski is a piece of it, but we have other pieces that are important. And frankly, one of them's a tough topic. One of them's density in the right spots, and increased density causes its own issues with traffic and water quality and environmental concerns. That's a tough topic. Another issue that is tough to talk about is, and Representative Gregory mentioned it, unreasonable regulation. Now we need regulation. We need regulation that satisfies the problem. But over-regulation, and some of these projects can't get out of the queue. They can't get approved. And I'm not going to pick on local governments. I'm going to pick on the state right now. Let me give you an example. The Florida Department of Transportation. I have someone that wants to give them right-of-way because they're building a development. So you got to give them 10 feet or so of right-of-way along the state road. So FDOT's position is, well, you need to do a title search, which makes a lot of sense, because you want to make sure the land you give to FDOT doesn't have a mortgage on it. Well, FDOT wants a title search back to the, quote, earliest public record. You know what that means? I got to do a title search back from the deed from Spain to the United States. And I can't find a person to tell me why. It's a frustrating process, and you need regulation, you need standards, but when they're unreasonable, and something like that has cost 6 to 9 to 12 months in interest carry and cost and expense. So that's another component of affordable housing. So affordable housing is a number of issues that we have to work on. We had a pretty controversial bill that we passed last session regarding timeframes for local governments to approve certain matters, and that was controversial at some levels. But we need to work on a number of issues to solve this affordable housing problem. Sadowski is a critical piece, but like I mentioned, there's 2 or 3 or 4 other pieces that are very, very, very important to make sure that anyone who wants to come here can live here and do it affordably. I mean, my legislative aide and my district secretary, they moved here, and it's tough to find anything under $1,000 to rent. We're gonna continually lose great people from our region to other areas unless we start helping to solve this problem. And it's every level. It's state, it's federal, it's local. So thank you for your commitment to this issue, because it's important for your business, your employees, and for our community.
I shared this with you, I think last Pancakes and Politics, and I do it with all the chambers that I come in front of. Habitat for Humanities. Habitat for Humanities, Habitat for Humanities. We just did a dual house dedication over in Pinellas. I got a Sarasota habitat, I got a Manatee habitat, I got a Hillsborough habitat, and a Pinellas habitat. We do not need to come up with a housing department and pay someone 6-figure salaries to oversee it and staff it with 1 million people with 401ks and benefits and all that. You can take that little bit of money, that 50 grand, and leverage that to an organization that already has the infrastructure and the sweat equity and manpower to do it inside of 30 to 60 days. That's the easiest way. As far as the Sadowski Trust Fund, I think I shared this with you guys also, and Representative Robinson is right. It's part of it. It's not all of it. In its heyday, it generates between $350 to $400 million. But if you take $350 to $400 million and divide it by 67 counties, 412 cities, it's not going that far. You have a local commitment also from the county and the city local governments. In my home county, or my home city, they just passed the biggest budget in the history of the city, $717 million. Now, they would tell you that affordable housing is a crisis. Hear me now, it's a crisis. But in that budget, they had $250,000 for affordable housing. So it's a crisis, but it's not important. You know, we also built an $85 million police station and a $110 million pier. Show me your budget, I'll show you your values. We also, in my district, it's a lot of challenge areas, we get what's called Community Development Block Grant money, CDBG funds. And those funds are for, you can Google it when you get a chance, anti-poverty, affordable housing, infrastructure. That's it. Now, they're being used for a whole host of other things, but that's what they're for, and they come from the federal government. You count the people that need it. You send your plan up to the federal government. The federal government verifies that with census data. That means someone, when they actually counted those poor people, to make sure they were there, and they submit funds to that end. But you have got to commit those funds to that purpose, along with Sadowski money, along with the county and city commitments. Another thing I want to share with you, and this is local government and home rule, Habitat builds homes. That's what they do. And if you're not building homes, not homes, home ownership. Let's get away from affordability. They're building home ownership. So if you're not going to help them do that and you're not going to do it, I would say get out of the way. The most craziest thing I saw in all the dedications, and Mike Sutton will probably amen this, is when the local government requires them to build sidewalks the width of the property out front, okay? Now, that's not a sidewalk for 20 miles, nowhere around. And the city or the county is never going to put a sidewalk in. Hear me, never. But they make them pour sidewalks to the center of the property, you know, east to west or north to south. So if you're in a wheelchair, you can roll off into the woods or roll back. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, to look at it, it's crazy. But that costs us another $10,000 to the house. So if you take 5 of those where you exempt them from building that sidewalk, build one straight out to the road, just like the other houses have, and not make them go, you know, east and west or north and south, 5 of those can build another house. It's creative things that we can do, but we're not doing it. You know, you heard about regulations and stuff and what's causing it. We have got to get out of the way. It's going to be tough. We always had a problem since I've been in Tallahassee. We had this thing called Hurricane Irma. And right after that, we had the St. Valentine's Day massacre with the Parkland shooting. And right after that, we had Michael. So it's always going to be something. That's why we got to be in lockstep with finding ways for all of us to be conservative, like criminal justice reform, reducing that gang time. That's going to free up $800 million. You won't need no Sadowski money. I just told you, 350 to 400. Imagine 800 million taken away from locking up 96,000 people. Imagine what you can do with that. So it's things that we got. I think we have everything we need and some of what we want, but we have got to come together where it's doable to provide for what we need to provide for. And that's what's going to help us. Also, I want to close with this. I just heard on the way over here that, yeah, the economy's growing and it's growing jobs, but over half of the people in the United States that's employed make less than $18 an hour. Those are the kind of jobs that are growing. You try paying $1,000 a month rent, like Representative Robinson talked about, with $18 an hour and taking care of a family. It's wages too. I'm not putting that on you. I'm just telling you it's a tsunami. It's a whole lot of stuff, but it's part of it and it's not all of it. And last thing, our new Secretary Moskowitz, came and presented before the Legislative Black Caucus at one of our meetings, and he shared with us that what they're doing. So this is a message to be wary what you wish for. Instead of raiding the Sadowski Trust Fund, which the governor supported not raiding it, and the Senate president, the raiding part came from over on the House side. That came from our leadership. So instead of doing that, he's proposing that we don't raid it, but we take all those funds and transfer them to the Panhandle to help those people with housing, which means you still won't get anything here. But know that we're surrounded by water on 3 sides. And I pray God that one day we don't need it. I made 3 trips to the Panhandle. Those people have nothing. They have a tree in a house. They sleep in a tent out back with black mold. So that's the problem we got. 67 counties, 412 cities, 21 million people.
I agree with my colleagues that balancing the budget really shows our priorities, and I have not gone to one of these things and without someone bringing up affordable housing. I think this is all of our priority, and we need to treat it as such. But it's not just budget items that we should be thinking about when we think about affordable housing. There are 2 things that happened last legislative session that I believe showed that we as a legislature did not really put affordable housing first. And the first thing that we did as a legislature was take away local government's ability to negotiate development orders to include affordable housing as a requirement in a development order. I believe that local governments should have the ability to negotiate with developers for what they need in their community, and that's one of the things that the legislature took away from local governments this last legislative session. The other thing that happened this last legislative session was the inability of people to challenge comprehensive plans. So back before 2012, we had comprehensive planning that then the state provided oversight for. So every local government came up with a plan to say, this is how we're going to build affordable housing. This is how we're going to make sure that the people who are moving to our community or who live in our community can actually or work in our community can actually live here. And then the state would provide oversight and say, okay, you've said you're going to do this, now do this. That kind of oversight, we got rid of that as a legislature in 2012. And now the comprehensive planning process has been scaled back considerably. And this last legislative session, we took some more teeth out of it because if you are someone who wants to challenge a comprehensive plan amendment and you lose, then you as the individual has to pay the prevailing party attorney's fees. So that puts a damper on challenging comprehensive plans, which if this makes sense to you, it used to be the state that provided oversight. Then the next option was individuals or neighborhoods providing oversight of comprehensive planning. And now that tool is also taken out of the toolbox because you are at risk of having to pay prevailing party attorney's fees if you lose. So I think that there's a lot of things that we could do legislatively to encourage affordable housing and encourage really smart development, but instead we're sort of going in the other direction.
Thank you all for that. That's all we're going to have for questions today. I want to recognize Representative Gregory for filing his resolution earlier this year, honoring recognizing the 200th anniversary of the signing of the Adams-Onis Treaty. So, Representative Robinson, if you want to go back 200 years and look for those land grants, go ahead and check that out, and you can get with Representative Gregory on that. I want to say a special thank you again to our sponsors, Spectrum and Charter Communications and Kaiser University, and I'd like to invite Dr. Michelle Morgan with Kaiser University to please come to the podium and make some remarks.
Good morning, and gosh, aren't we fortunate to live in a community with such a strong delegation and the hometown Senate President who makes us very proud. So thank you all for what you're doing, and especially for making civility and proper decorum a priority. I think that's something that, as a university is near and dear to my heart, because I'm like, my goodness, are we going to be able to protect lively and vigorous debate in the classroom? Universities thrive on that. That's where we kind of encourage people to find out who they are and who they're going to be as an adult and as a contributing member of our community. So we thank you for that, because we do value that. We also thank you for your support of higher education, of course. And for those of you who don't know much about Kaiser University, we are a private, not-for-profit university here in the state of Florida. We've been here for over 40 years, and specifically in our community here for going into our 25th year, looking into 2020. So we have degrees gauging all the way from associate to doctoral degrees. We are a level 6 university and have a number of, I think, about 35 sport athletic teams at this point. And our second year of our football team, we just ended our season undefeated, so we were thankful for that. But we have about 40 different majors that we offer in this community, where we are providing the programs that specifically talk and speak to the workforce gaps in this community. So there's been a lot of discussion about preparing workforce. We are doing that. We're training and retraining and retain about 85% of our graduates right here at home in this community. And one of the final notes I'll mention, because I know healthcare usually is a big part of this discussion as well, is that we are the number one producer of RNs that passed the NCLEX exam on the first attempt. So we're very, very proud of that, and specifically for those of our hospitals in this community that we provide the workforce to. So if you're interested, certainly see one of us, but we thank you, and we thank the Chamber, of course, for being a strong supporter of our legislative priorities and making sure our voice is heard in Tallahassee. Thank you.
Again, I want to thank you, Dr. Morgan. Again, I want to thank our state legislators for being here this morning, our sponsors for all of their support, of course, our legislative delegation, the rest of the staff that support the legislators, and, of course, IMG Academy for hosting us. We hope you all have a great holiday season. We look forward to seeing you after the legislative session for Politics and Pints. Thank you.